Jenn Donahue, you are a U.S. Naval officer, you are an engineer, a mentor, and a speaker, and you are a firm believer that with the right support, everyone possesses the power to do great things. So here you are still in the Navy, but you are also helping civilians becoming better leaders. Jenn, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you are not my usual guest in the podcast. I don't have that many engineers, and you has been told. I'm sure you have been told this before. You are a female engineer to make things more. I mean, we are in the 21st century, but it's still something that people notice. I would like to ask you about that. But can you tell us a little bit about your background? Make believe that you are 17 years old and you are trying to decide what to do with your life.
Absolutely. It actually started earlier than that. It actually started when I was about 11 years old. And whenever I was an 11-year-old girl, at that point, Barbie was everything.
Mm.
All girls were supposed to have Barbies and they were supposed to play with Barbies. But what I really loved was the Barbie house. And so I bought the Barbie house with my allowance, and I tore that thing apart and I put it back together and I rearranged it like over and over and over again. And poor Barbie, she never actually got to live in the house because it was constantly under renovation. And so that's when I realized that I love to build things. That was the start of it. And my mom kind of recognized this. And so she started giving me more toolkits that I could build things with. And by the time that I was 17, I had a great, great teacher in high school that really started to push me towards the sciences and to physics. And oh my gosh, I fell in love with math and science, and that's really where it started. And from there, basically everything is written at that point.
Do you play with Legos as well as the Barbie house?
We didn't have a lot of Legos. We
Mm.
had Lincoln Logs. So
Okay,
I don't know if
yes.
you remember those. We had tons and tons of Lincoln Logs. So played with Lincoln Logs quite a bit.
Okay, so I mean, pardon my bias, but uh, how did it feel to be a female in a math class or in a science class? I assume because it is going on today, you find a woman in a math class and it's like one among the guys. And I'm
Right.
sure 20 years ago, I'm sorry, I don't know your age, but I'm just guessing. At the time that you were going to high school, it was about the same. How did it feel to be that person different from everybody else?
There were a few females in my classes, but I usually was one of the few females in the room. And I started to learn, how to fit in. It
Mm.
was nice because it was at an earlier age, and I started to kind of understand more about the way that the guys were thinking. So I wasn't always kind of like on my own and by myself. But through my entire career, I've pretty much only been the only woman in the room. Being a female engineer, there was only two of us in my class, and the rest were guys. In the military, even today, we are only 9% women in the engineering field. So we're such a small group that I actually became accustomed to it. Now, if I would have been absolutely thrown into it from the beginning, it would be very different. But since it started at a younger age and I got to just be around guys all the time, it sort of has become natural. To be honest, I actually kind of freak out a little bit when I'm in a room with like all women. I'm like, almost like I don't know how to talk to other women because I've been talking to men all my life. So
Right.
so I gotta have the opposite problem. If you throw me in with women, I'm kind of a fish out of water.
There are two school of thoughts. Is either you become as one of the guys or you leverage your femininity and well, I mean, use it to your advantage or not to seem manipulative, but all of us
Right.
have different assets, and being a woman is an asset on itself. So which one are you?
It changed over the period of my life.
Mm.
Whenever I was younger, I almost had to have my camouflage on whenever I was with the other guys. I had to blend in just because those were the times. If I would have come in with like, bright pink nail polish, I probably would have been excluded. But
Mm.
because I tried to fit in and, really just sort of put on, you know, the persona that is like, hey, I'm just one of the guys, that helped me, you know, quite a ways, and so that I didn't stand out, and you know, I wasn't picked on, and that helped. Now, as I've progressed through my life, I've realized that I need to start embracing the fact that yes, I am bringing something very different to the table, and I've started to break out a little bit more, you know, to say, hey, we need a diversity of thought, you know, and it's all about that. And so over the span of my life, when it's now a little bit more accepting to have females in engineering and math and science, I feel like now I can start to kind of grow in that different area.
Why do you think women are still resisting to join the STEAM sector?
I think that there's just a history, you
Mm,
know, you know, even whenever I talk to some middle schoolers, you know, they think they're supposed to fit into this mold, you know, that I'm supposed to be this way. I'm supposed to like more of the languages and the social skills and things like that, as opposed to the you know, the hardcore math and science. And really, we have to almost start younger than that. I've got a good friend who has a 7-year-old, and she's also a scientist, and she knows that her daughter loves math and science, so she's just been promoting and helping her with the math and science. And she started to see already that, you know, whenever her daughter's around other girls, she's starting to get the pressure of, hey, math and science aren't cool, you know. And so it's one of those things that, you know, I think it's going to take maybe a generation or more for it to become more accepting.
right.
It's just, I hate to say it, but that's just the sort of the norm that people seem to fall back on.
But I do believe we are progressing in the right direction. I do believe,
Absolutely.
I mean, I am no longer a student. I haven't been for a long time, but I do go to university to take classes here and there, and I do see more and more women in science. So I think I don't know about maybe even more, longer than one more generation, but I think there is it's going the right way. Uh,
I totally agree. Uh, if I may, so I went to Texas A&M, and like I said, I was only one of two women that were in the room. But then I did my master's and PhD at UC Berkeley, and one of the professors there made sure in the sessions that he had almost 50% women in the class.
nice.
And so for a lot of us, again, we were not used to having so many women around, but in our class we had 50% women, and that's the first time that I've ever seen that many female engineers like all assembled at the same time. And then I have another really great mentor, and he recognizes that a lot of times, you know, we females, we feel like we have to almost like work harder to be accepted.
Mm.
And so he started to gather us together and you know, kind of hook us all up together so that we're all supporting each other, and then he supports us as a team. And really, we are starting to have almost more females in the geotechnical earthquake engineering field than men. And
Wow.
so it's really, it takes some of these, you know, really strong proponents, you know, to just try to help, you know, sort of push and open the doors a little bit for us.
Okay, so you did another thing that was unusual, that not only you went into science, but also you joined the military.
Yes.
Can you let us know how that happened? Did you just, you always wanted to be in the military, or was that you got drunk and then you signed up?
Shh, don't tell anybody about that part. No. So I was at Texas A&M. I was an ocean engineer, and I was watching all my friends go down to Houston and work for the oil and gas industry. So that's only 90 miles away from Texas A&M. And I looked at them and I was like, I've got so much angst. Like, I want to go out and I want to see the world. I don't want to just go down to Houston and start work. I need to go explore. I need to go see what the world is all about. So I looked at the different uniformed services. I looked at the Army, I looked at the Navy, the Air Force, and really the Navy had the best fit for me for being an ocean engineer. And I joined the Navy and I did engineering construction all over the world. And it's the best decision that I ever made in my life. I really got a chance to go see everything that I could have ever wanted to see.
Well, can you name some of the countries where you have been, or some of the missions, or some of the projects that you work on?
Oh, absolutely. I started out in Guam, of all places. I was in Guam, I was in Puerto Rico, Southern California quite a bit. I had a drilling and blasting project in Alaska, which was really, really fun. I was in Iraq in 2008. I was in Afghanistan in 2014. Let's see, where else have I been? I've kind of been all over the United States for different missions as well.
So all these are missions or projects related to science or engineering, but were you in danger or at any given moment at times that you had to, I guess, pick up your rifle and be afraid for your own life?
So luckily, as an officer, I was usually guarded in some way. But when we were in Iraq, yes, they shot at my helicopter while I was flying to and from. Same thing whenever I was in Afghanistan. They were always shooting at the helicopter that I was in. We travel around because we're engineers. So we travel around in these large armored vehicles. And so, yeah, they've shot at my vehicles and things like that also. But typically, once I get to my spot, what we do for expeditionary construction is basically we drive out to the middle of nowhere, we circle up the vehicles, we point the guns out, and then we build in the middle. So usually I would get transported to the middle of that hub, and you know, at that point then I'm directing what's going on, and at that point I've never had to actually pick up my rifle and try to defend myself, which is nice. Usually there's a perimeter around me of my other guys that are protecting me.
Right. Of course, I don't think I have ever asked this before, but how does it feel to be shot at? I mean, what is going on in your body? Your adrenaline is pump up. Are you in fear or just survival mode? What's the feeling?
It's trust.
Mm,
You know, you trust that, you know, whoever's flying the helicopter knows what they're doing. You trust that whoever's driving that vehicle, you know, you trust that the armor is strong enough, and you go into the whole idea knowing that, you know, today could be my last day,
mm,
you know. And
wow,
so
wow.
excuse me. And so you just know that that's what it is. You know, I just remember several times looking out the back of the helicopter and seeing the tracer rounds, you know, coming up at us. And, you know, we just kind of joked about it on the inside of the helicopter, like, well, they're really terrible shots. You know, like you know, they just can't hit anything, you know. And so we joke about these things. And that's how a lot of us get through it is, you know, we make light of it and we joke about it so that we can really kind of get on with our lives.
Do you think that being in this kind of extreme situation help you become a better leader, or can a person that has never tested danger can also become a good leader?
Absolutely. I had very extreme events that made me the leader that I am. Whenever I came back, so I was activated to go to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I came back to a civilian job right afterwards, and it gave me a better perspective
Mm,
about, you know, what's really crucial and what's not. You know, people would get like so amped up over they're using the wrong font on this PowerPoint, like, oh my God, the world is ending, and I'm like, nobody's shooting at us, nobody's trying to kill us,
right.
we'll get through this, you know. And so it kind of made me realize that, you know, it's okay, everybody calm down, nobody's trying to kill us, we'll just change the font on the PowerPoint and we'll just get on with our lives. So that helped me be a little bit more calm in very normal situations. But really, it doesn't take those types of situations to make you a great leader. It really just takes understanding who you are as a leader and practicing and studying and trying to be that person that people want to follow.
Wow. So you were there full time, but you are no longer a full time military person anymore. So can you tell us about that transition from you being full time in the Navy to now being in the civilian world?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I always tell people who are transitioning between the two, if you're upset with one of your coworkers, you can't make them do push-ups. No matter no matter how much like you want to like do something, you can't make them do push-ups. So that you had to learn to just deal with, okay, I can't do that. Um, but but really that transition between the military and the civilian life has been fantastic because again, it taught me like what's important. But because in the military you were so organized all the time, I was able to bring that back. We're very attention to detail oriented in the military, and I was able to take that with me for the civilian side. You know, you look at every little thing just to make sure that it's right. You know, there it might be life and death. You know, here it's like it is life and death also on analysis, you know, for looking at a bridge. I want to make sure that I'm doing that right. So I have that focus to make sure that I am doing the right things.
Uh,
It's really been, quite a godsend.
Wow. Just one more question in regards to the military, and this applies to the civilian world as well, but in particularly to the military. Were you ever a victim of sexual harassment?
I was, hmm, maybe whenever I was much more junior,
Okay.
but
Okay.
on the most part, not really. And again, that's because I learned how to put on a camouflage,
Mm,
and I learned how to blend in, pretty well. So I was kind of always one of the guys, and it was a whole lot easier.
right.
Several of the female officers that had come to the battalion with me, they didn't have that type of background,
Mm,
and for sure they were sexually harassed. And just being who I am, I'm very protective. And so I just like went in and like, let the guys have it. It's like, you can't treat people like that,
right.
and they were like, oh, and I don't think they even realized what they were doing, but so I haven't really had that issue. I know others have. And so I always speak up and say something about it whenever I start to recognize it.
It is my impression that as well, that's another area in which we as a civilization are improving. I assume that way back, I don't know, 40 or 30 or even longer ago, to have a female officer would have been like an invitation to some kind of harassment. And I
Mhm.
have friends in the military, and I get the impression that that's just the thing. I mean, I'm sure it still exists, but less than before.
I would say yes. Back in the mid 90s, that's when they started to let females and female officers into the construction battalions. Since 1942, it was always guys. And we started to introduce females in the early to mid 90s, and now 25 years later, you don't see those types of issues that you previously had because everybody is now accepting of it. And you've had some great women leaders, and they say, hey, you know what, it doesn't matter if you're male or female. She's doing a great job. And the same thing is true. If you have a poor female leader, you can also have poor male leaders at the same time. People sort of start to see through that, and they don't really recognize gender as much as they used to.
Right. Okay. So when I think of the military, I think of all the movies that I have seen of this drill sergeant screaming to his soldiers and telling them to do this and that and spitting in their face. Uh, I'm, I, I hope that's not the case, but what are some similarities and some difference that you see in leadership in the military world and in the civilian world?
So you talk about the screaming in people's face.
Yes, you
Uh,
do that, or give me 20 push-ups or whatever.
right. So when I first got in the military, that's kind of what everybody did. And I thought, well, okay, that's the kind of leader that I'm supposed to be, because people are yelling and screaming at me. I thought, well, okay, I'm supposed to yell and scream at my people. And I did. And it felt really horrible. I mean, it felt like in the pit of my stomach, I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't who I'm supposed to be. And oh God, I felt like really awful about it. And luckily I had a second chance where I have a crusty senior enlisted person, somebody who's been in the military for 25 years. You're still in charge of them, but they have a lot of history. And what he did is help train me to be a better leader and understand, where I felt comfortable. And what I found was that if I'm more interactive with my troops, as opposed to, doing this, just say, hey, let's get through this together. Do you have ideas? Let's go out there. Let's us do this. And that made all the difference. Now I've taken that same thing and I've used it in the civilian world as well. A lot of times you get project managers that are like, this is my project. This is the way that we're going to do things. You do this, you do this, you do this. Well, if you're a direct report, you're like, okay, well, that's his project and I have no ownership in it. I don't really care. But if you turn that around and you start to get them involved, that this is our project, this is your responsibility, this is your authority to do this type of work, all of a sudden everybody's starting to buy into it. And now they have ownership and I want to see this project succeed. And so they're very translatable between the two, between the military and the civilian career.
Wow. So one of the things that makes a leader a great leader is when the member of their team trusts that leader, that everything,
Yeah,
every decision that he or she takes is for the benefit of everyone, the whole team. How can
right.
a leader learn to earn that trust from his team?
It starts with the leader trusting the team members. They always joke that, leadership is a two-way, or trust is a two-way street. Well, I would say as a leader, you got to get on the on-ramp first. And
Mm,
you have to show the trust to your team first. Show that you trust them. One of the best ways to do that is that if you're new to the team, bring in each one of the team members separately and get to know them, not just their name, not just what their strengths and their weaknesses are, but who their family is. What are their goals? What are their aspirations? Now you're showing interest in them and you're understanding who they are so that you can trust them. And then they'll start to trust you back. As long as you're making sure that everything that you're doing is to help them, give them the most resources that they need to be successful, you're going to get that trust back from them.
wow, wow. Yeah, I heard many times that uh, being a leader is a position of service. You are there
Yes,
not to be on top of your team, but to service your team and help them out
right.
succeed on whatever is it that their goals or an objective are. Oh,
Absolutely.
okay, so uh, there are since now you're in the civilian world,
Hmm.
there are corporations or businesses that are uh, structure in this way. Oh, this is the way we have always done things, and it have worked for us for 100 years, and this is the way that we're going to continue doing things. But of course, we have things like the coronavirus who comes and shakes everything else. So, how for a leader who has always been doing one thing this particular way and has worked all the time, how do they adapt to changes? Because the world is always changing regardless.
Right. I would say if you're doing the same thing that you've always done, you're 30 years behind. As leaders, we have to keep up to date. We have to keep learning ourselves. Like every day, we need to start learning something. Maybe it's learning something about ourselves, maybe it's learning something technical. Read, be proficient. So you evolve with the times. And whenever you hit one of these big things like the coronavirus, start reading, start understanding, hey, what are other people doing in order to maintain their teams and maintain resilience and maintain loyalty with the teams? Because there's other people out there that are looking at this. That person has to go out and they have to figure out how to do it themselves. And there's a lot of really great literature out there. You just have to go and find it and feel and basically see what feels right to you. But yeah, you can't just stay stagnant or else you're going to be left behind.
How about consulting with other leaders to say, hey, what are you doing? How are you handling this coronavirus? What's new
Right.
in your team or your situation?
Absolutely. You have colleagues. Go and find somebody. Just because I'm an engineer, I still go talk to my friends that are in the finance world
Right.
or they're in the medical world. Don't just say like, oh, I'm an engineer, I can only talk to engineers. Find your other friends and see what they're doing. Maybe they're doing something right. And if you found something that you're doing right, share those lessons with your friends and your other colleagues. I look at this as like, we don't need to be in competition with everybody all the time. We need to be helping people. So if you found something that works really well, tell people, publish a
Right.
quick article, publish a blog, do
Mm.
something and say, hey, this worked for me, this could work for you, because we're all in this together and we got to band together in order to get through.
Right. Okay. So another thing is, one thing is to get your team members to trust you. Okay. Like Jen has the best thought, the best intention for our team, but how about to inspire them as well? Like, we see corporations where, let's say Netflix, like everyone
Right.
is in steroids, producing something new every day, or Amazon, or the team of Elon Musk now producing rockets. So these people are inspired. They're just not, taking in the clock. They want to get things done. So as a leader, how do we get that inspiration, that desire for the team members to excel themselves?
Well, one thing we can't have is a cancel culture where if you do something wrong, all of a sudden you're out. Like we have to make sure that we have to let our people fail. I know that sounds kind of hard, but we don't ever want to see our people fail, but we have to give them the flexibility so that they can go out and try new things. And if it fails, then basically say, hey, that didn't work out. Maybe we need to modify what you did, or maybe you need to go in a different track. But as long as you're telling your people, hey, go out and try new things, I have your back, they're
Right.
going to go out and do that, because people are really creative. And if you give people the space to be creative, they're going to fill that space. But
Wow.
you have to tell them that, like, it's okay to fail. That's the only way that you're going to do it. I mean, think about all the times that Elon Musk and his team have failed. But you know what? He keeps going back. He
Right.
doesn't just dwell on that failure. He's like, okay, that didn't work. Let's shift. Let's figure it out.
Right. Right. Okay. And how about also because of coronavirus, but before that, this is now the theme of the moment, but we have been also losing a lot of employees, and sometimes you had to
Right.
tell someone, hey, listen, the situation have changed. We are no longer needing your service. How do you say that to a member of someone who have served you for years, let's say?
That's the hardest part, isn't it?
Mm,
You feel invested in this person. I think you had to have just that honest conversation. You had to be absolutely transparent. You've given your trust to them, they've given your trust to you. So continue with that trust and that transparency. You have to say, I'm sorry we let you go. And hey, you know what? Do what you can for them. Write them a letter of recommendation. Maybe you have a colleague that they might be able to go to. Help them out as opposed to just cutting them loose and letting them go. They will appreciate that. There's only so much you can do for people, but if you show that you're really willing to help them get to their next step, that's going to go a long way.
wow. And one last thing. So one thing that helps people improve in their career is they continuously investing in themselves. And sometimes, you could just suggest it, but it would be nice to have people that on their own they're taking this additional course to, I don't know, become more, to have more skills. Is there any way that a leader can motivate people to continue educating themselves and improving themselves so you could create a better team?
Absolutely. This is getting back to knowing your team and what their goals and aspirations are. Maybe you have somebody who is just absolutely happy with where they are. They like what they do, and that's just that makes them happy. But then you have somebody else who wants to be the president of the company someday. Sit down with them and start to map out where they need to be on that trajectory. We do this all the time in the military. We always say, where do you want to be on your next position? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Do you want to be an admiral someday?
Mm,
Here's the path to get there. It's the same thing in business. Look at the projects that you have and just start to ask. You have to ask the questions. What
right.
do you need to be more successful? Because I'm sure that they're got some piece of software and I'm like, this isn't doing it. I need something over here. And if that means sending somebody to a class so that you can do things more efficiently, more effectively, cheaper in the long run, so that you can beat your competitors,
Right.
that's what you need to do. You need to think about that.
You need to invest in your people.
Absolutely.
We spoke before the interview about a three-step process of being a leader. Can you tell us exactly what is that three-step process?
So the 3-step process is first knowing yourself.
Mm,
We have to start there. It always starts with you. You have to understand who you are as a leader. Maybe you are one of those big and bold natural leaders and you're out there in the front and doing things. Or maybe you're like me, who's introverted and kind of shy, but you want to be more personable. Now, there's all types of ways to get to understand who you are as a leader, but the thing that you don't want to do is try to be the leader that you're not.
mm,
People will see right through that, and that's not effective whatsoever. So understand who you are first. The next one is starting to establish trust. And this is
mm.
where we're talking about understanding who your team is. Get on that on ramp. What are their goals? What are their aspirations? What do they need to be successful? And if you don't understand something that somebody is doing on your team, maybe they're a subject matter expert, have the vulnerability to say, I don't understand. Go and sit down and talk to that person. Say, tell me everything that you know about this and what I need to be looking for. Now, all of a sudden they understand, hey, you're willing to listen to me. Hey, wow, I'm important. So you start to develop trust. Okay, so now once you have that trust, now we're going to push from from there, even beyond. And I like to call it the model teams, the motivated, dedicated, and loyal teams. Once you have trust, now you can basically let your team fly. Give them autonomy, give them responsibility, give them what I call left and right lateral limits to say, within this area, you have complete autonomy. You take care of the project in any way that you see fit. Now they have ownership of that. They don't have to keep coming back to you all the time to say, hey, what about this? What about that? They have the authority and the responsibility to do what's needed. And that's what people are looking for. The companies that are able to manage in this way have 143% growth rate.
Wow.
People want to come to those types of companies. So you have to start with yourself, then you have to develop the trust, and then you have to just let them fly.
Wow, wow. Okay, one piece of current news, and then you tell me how we adapted to leadership. 2 days ago, Jeff Bezos decided to let go of his post or job as a CEO. So my question is, how does a leader know when it's time to let go?
I think it's different for everybody. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he realized that there are other people who are going to be doing a great job. I mean, that's, as leaders, that's what we need to do. We need to train the next generation.
Right, right.
And maybe he realized, hey, I see something in this person. They're going to do great. And then you basically take a step back and let them see how they do.
Is that
Others,
something?
so that's my first thought. I had a great CEO at the company that I just recently worked for. And to be honest, I think he was a little bit tired, but he also wanted to concentrate more on the analysis side as opposed to running the company. And so that's one of the reasons that he stepped down, to give somebody else a chance to succeed and be in the front while he's able to come back and maybe do more engineering type of work. So there's a lot of different reasons that I've found so far.
Wow. Is this something that a leader should be working on grooming the next generation right from the beginning? Because we also have seen leaders who, for whatever reason, they had to step down, or maybe they have health issue, and they haven't trained the next person, and now a company is
Right.
flying blind. So
Right.
is that one of those responsibilities that a leader has to perform as well?
Oh, absolutely. I know of a company that was in the San Francisco Bay Area that was in this exact same situation where the person in charge didn't want to let go of any of that. And he had people underneath him, you know, they all liked working there, but he would not relinquish anything. And he wound up getting really sick. And there was nobody to step into his place to run the company, and the company folded.
Wow.
You know, one of the things that we always say is, I have to make sure that people that are my direct reports know what I'm doing as well. Because we had this saying, it's like, in case I get hit by a bus, you have to take over. So that's what I'm always trying to do, is make sure that there's at least 1 or 2 people on the team that if I get hit by a bus, the project's not going to stop. They're able to take it over, because there are emergencies that occur that it's going to take somebody out. Now, do you want your project and your business to fail because of that? So always be thinking about that in the background as well.
Wow, this is amazing stuff, Jen. I wonder if you could tell the listeners where they can continue following the work that you do, and see the speaking that you do, or yeah, tell us where to find you.
Okay. So I can be found at www.Donahue, DONAHUE.com. I'm also on Twitter at Jenn Donahue. I can be found on LinkedIn at Jenn Donahue. I can be found on Instagram at I am Jenn Don. Are you seeing like a pattern here? I'm just making sure that you see the pattern.
All that will be in the show notes, regardless. If the listener didn't catch it, it will be in the show notes. Jen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. This has really been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time today.